fact, it has begun. He's in the Roosevelt Room. Let's listen in.
And they're as they bravely fight to defend their country, and they are doing that. And as Putin continues his merciless assault, the United States and our allies and partners continue to work in lockstep to ramp up the economic pressures on Putin and to further isolate Russia on the global stage. Later today, together with other NATO allies in the G7, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, as well as the European Union, we're going to jointly announce several new steps to squeeze Putin and hold him even more accountable for his aggression against Ukraine. And I want to speak to a few of those points today. First, each of our nations is going to take steps to deny most favored nation status to Russia. Now, most favored nation status designation means two countries have agreed to trade with each other under the best possible terms: low tariffs, few barriers of trade, and the highest possible imports allowed. In the United States, we call this permanent normal trade relations, PNTR, but it's the same thing. Revoking PNTR for Russia is going to make it harder for Russia to do business with the United States, and doing it in unison with other nations that make up half of the global economy will be another crushing blow to the Russian economy. It's already suffering very badly from our sanctions. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, Leaders Schumer and McConnell, and Senators Wyden and Crapo, Representatives Neal and Brady, for their bipartisan leadership on this in the Congress. I would like to offer a special thanks to Speaker Pelosi, who's been a strong advocate for revoking PNTR and who agreed to hold off on that in the House until I could line up all of our key allies to keep us in complete unison. Unity among our allies is critically important, as you all know, from my perspective at least. Many issues divide us in Washington, but standing for democracy in Ukraine, pushing Russia's aggression, should not be one of those issues. The free world is coming together to confront Putin. Our two parties here at home are leading the way. And with that bipartisan cooperation, I'm looking forward to signing into law the bill revoking PNTR, which is, again, most people think of it as most favored nation status. We're also taking a further step of banning imports of goods from several signature sectors of the Russian economy, including seafoods, vodka, and diamonds. And we're going to continue to squeeze Putin. The G7 will seek to deny Russia the ability to borrow from leading multinational institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Putin is an aggressor. He is the aggressor, and Putin must pay the price. He cannot pursue a war that threatens the very foundations, which he's doing, the very foundations of international peace and stability, and then ask for financial help from the international community. The G7 is also stepping up pressure on corrupt Russian billionaires. We're adding new names to the list of oligarchs and their families that we're targeting. And we're increasing coordination among the G7 countries to target and capture their ill-begotten gains. They support Putin. They steal from the Russian people, and they seek to hide their money in our countries. They're part of that kleptocracy that exists in Moscow, and they must share in the pain of these sanctions. And while we're going after these their super yachts and their vacation homes and worth hundreds of millions of dollars, we're also going to make it harder for them to buy high-end products manufactured in our country. We're banning the export of luxury goods to Russia. They're also the latest steps we're taking, but they're not the last steps we're going to take. And as I said, at the beginning of all these steps, we're going to hit Putin harder because the United States and our closest allies and partners are acting in unison. And the totality of our sanctions and export controls is crushing the Russian economy. The ruble has lost more than half its value. They tell me it takes about 200 rubles to equal $1 these days. Moscow Stock Exchange has been closed for 2 weeks because they know the moment it opens, it will probably collapse. Credit rating agencies has downgraded Russia's government to junk status, its economy to junk status. The list of businesses, international corporations leaving Russia is growing by the day. We're also continuing to close corporations with allies and partners to make sure that the close cooperation we continue to have, the Ukrainian people are able to defend their own nation. The United States has sent more than $1 billion in security assistance to Ukraine over the last year, including anti-armor and anti-air capabilities, taking out tanks and planes and helicopters, with new shipments arriving every day. We, the United States, are also facilitating significant shipments of security assistance from our allies and partners to Ukraine. And the humanitarian front, we're working closely with the UN and humanitarian organizations to support the people of Ukraine who have been displaced by the violence in Ukraine. We're providing tens of thousands of tons of humanitarian supplies, food, water, medicines, coming via truck and train every single day. Yesterday in Poland, Vice President Harris announced an additional $53 million in additional humanitarian support to Ukraine. That brings the total humanitarian assistance to $107 million in just 2 weeks. We've joined this effort with more than 30 other countries who are providing hundreds of millions more. And last night, to their great credit, the Congress passed a bipartisan spending bill that included an additional $13.6 billion in new assistance to the Ukrainian people. And I look forward to signing that immediately. I also want to be clear, though. We will make sure Ukraine has weapons to defend against an invading Russian force. We will send money and food and aid to save the Ukrainian people. And I will welcome Ukrainian refugees. We should welcome them here with open arms if they need access. And we're going to provide more support for Ukraine. We're going to continue to stand together with our allies in Europe and send unmistakable message. We'll defend every single inch of NATO territory with the full might of the united and galvanized NATO. We will not fight a war against Russia in Ukraine. Direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III, something we must strive to prevent. But we already know Putin's war against Ukraine will never be a victory. He hoped to dominate Ukraine without a fight. He failed. He hoped to fracture European resolve. He failed. He hoped to weaken the transatlantic alliance. He failed. He hoped to split apart American democracies in terms of our positions. He failed. The American people are united. The world is united. And we stand with the people of Ukraine. We will not let autocrats and would-be emperors dictate the direction of the world. Democracies are rising to meet this moment, rallying the world to the side of peace and the side of security. We're showing our strength, and we will not falter. God bless all of you. God bless Ukraine, and God bless our troops.
The White House has said that Russia may use chemical weapons or create a false flag operation to use them. What evidence have you seen showing that? And would the U.S. have a military response if Putin does launch a chemical weapons attack?
I'm not going to speak about the intelligence, but Russia would pay a severe price if they use chemical weapons.
Extending the federal gas tax.
That was President Biden delivering remarks on a shift in the status of Russia as a trading partner, and some news there at the end regarding the potential for chemical weapons in Ukraine. If Russia uses them, the president saying they would pay a severe price. I want to bring in Weijia Zhang from the White House to talk about what we just heard. Weijia, the president banning imports of Russian seafood, vodka, and diamonds, and also dropping the country into a trade category that includes Cuba and North Korea. That's the move here. Can you tell us about the political timing of it and also his cooperation with Congress, which, of course, needs to approve the new trade status?
Sure, and the president indicated that Congress was already on board with this to remove Russia as a normal trading partner, and that means that it will no longer enjoy the best conditions for trading. As an example, low tariffs on any products that Russia exports here to the U.S. And as you mentioned, the president also announced a ban on imports of some of the biggest sectors in Russia, including seafood and jewelry dairy and vodka. But as much as this is meant to be a practical tool, a financial weapon against Putin, it is also meant to be very symbolic, which the president noted this is in lockstep with EU nations as well as the UK, because Russia is not a major trading partner of the U.S. In fact, it's number 26. But paired with all of those other countries, the idea is to yet again have something else to try to cripple the economy. And so that is why he made this announcement today. I should also note, Tony, that he was on the defense a little bit, because he also talked about the other ways that the U.S. is trying to get in the way of Putin's efforts, sending humanitarian and military assistance every single day. But of course, he is under fire right now for refusing to support sending more warplanes to Ukraine, which is what Ukraine has asked for. And so the president defended that decision, saying that they are doing everything they can not to interfere in a way that could lead to World War III. So I thought that was substantial as well. But yes, the big news today is another financial tool trying to stop Putin's war machine. Tony?
All right, those sanctions more than just symbolic. Weijia, thank you very much. But we do want to talk about the chemical weapons as well. So let's bring in our chief foreign affairs correspondent and moderator of Face the Nation. That's Margaret Brennan. Margaret, a lot of worry about the specter of nuclear incidents potentially at Chernobyl, but now we also have the potential threat of chemical weapons. What do we know on that front? What should people be concerned about?
The reason the president was specifically asked about chemical weapons is because U.S. intelligence is increasingly concerned that chemical weapons will be used by Russia in a false flag attack. In other words, they'll blame it on somebody else to justify more action. And what we are seeing today at the United Nations in New York is a detailed claim by Russia. I'm looking at the document here where they are already setting the predicate where they will blame a chemical attack on Ukraine. What we have heard under testimony from U.S. intelligence officials is that they do not believe that there is any risk of a chemical attack by Ukraine, but they are deeply concerned that Russia will carry out a chemical attack because of the history of what Vladimir Putin has done in Syria, where he backed Bashar al-Assad in his use of chemical weapons, where he has also used with his intelligence services chemical weapons on the soil of the United Kingdom within the past few years. So there is precedent here. There is deep concern that that's where this is going. And, you know, Tony, Vladimir Zelensky said, if you want to know what Russia plans, look at what Russia accuses others of. So these specific detailed claims by Russia that a chemical weapons attack is about to happen has only picked up the level of concern in the United States that may be around the corner. So we will note the president saying there that Vladimir Putin will pay a severe price if one is carried out. Exactly what that means, unclear. Remember, it was President Obama who drew that famous red line when it came to use of chemical weapons in Syria. President Biden just drew a line for us right now.
Yeah, it remains to be seen if anything will happen if that line is crossed. Margaret, as you were speaking, there was footage of Chernobyl on screen, and I'm curious to know the dynamic that you see playing out regarding Russian control of that nuclear facility where such a disaster occurred and what potentially could happen. Or rather, Zaporizhzhia is the one where there is concern that Russia could create a disaster but then blame the Ukrainians. Do I have that dynamic right?
Well, there are at least 2 nuclear power plants and then a concern about a third as well. And what the Ukrainian intelligence directorate announced this morning and made public is they say they've discovered a plot by Russia where Russia was actually moving dead bodies into refrigerator trucks to try to stage them around Chernobyl, and that specifically is where they are saying Russia would stage a terrorist attack. Now, from U.S. officials I've talked to this morning, they say, look, Russia has control of that facility. They don't have a lot of insight into exactly what's happening inside, in part because Russia unplugged the systems for communication. The UN agency, the IAEA, that monitors that says they don't have the ability to monitor what's happening inside the facility. But the United States, they are concerned about a radiation incident. They are more immediately concerned about a chemical attack at this moment.
All right, Margaret, thank you very much. Let's go to David Martin now at the Pentagon, covering the American military's perspective on the Russian invasion, also the mounting death toll that U.S. military personnel say is occurring on the Russian side. David, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you know about this distinction that the president is drawing between putting planes over Russia or over Ukrainian airspace and the current operation where they are handing heavy lethal weaponry to the Ukrainians and then letting them do the fighting?
Well, part of that distinction is based on the fact that the U.S. doesn't believe that if Poland were to send its MiGs to Ukraine, that it would really make much difference in the fighting. Poland has about 20 Russian-made MiG-29s, which the Ukrainians know how to fly, and they could, by their plan, transfer them to the U.S., which would then transfer them into Ukraine. But there is not an air-to-air battle going on right now in Ukraine. There are no dogfights over in the skies of Ukraine. But basically, what's happening is that the Ukrainian pilots are orbiting over western Ukraine, and the Russian pilots are operating out of Russia and out of Crimea, and they are hundreds of kilometers apart. And whenever they start to get close to each other, they veer off. And what's keeping them apart is all of the surface-to-air missiles on the ground. Both countries have sizable amounts of surface-to-air missiles that can shoot down these airplanes, and both sides are trying to conserve their air forces. So there's just, at least in the U.S. military's view, no need for extra MiGs right now in Ukraine. There is a need for more anti-tank weapons and more shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles, which you can use against helicopters, and bigger weapons that you can use against airplanes.
David, and those supplies may be coming in the form of on C-17s landing in Poland as we speak. Kyiv is facing pressure, has been for days, has not fallen yet, but the Pentagon is saying that Russian forces may be inside a 10-mile perimeter of the city. What do you know? What's the latest on that front?
Well, this morning I was told there had been no significant Russian advance over the last 12 hours or so, but that leaves the Russians on the east within about 10 miles of the city center, and on the west within 10 miles of the city center, and on the east within about 25 miles of the city center. And the U.S. believes that they are still trying to encircle that city and then begin a siege of the capital. But British intelligence says that Russia has had to divert so many troops to these other cities that they may simply not have enough to encircle Kyiv.
Yeah, not a quick war, becoming quite a grinding conflict here, and a civilian death toll that is mounting. David, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Our coverage will continue on the CBS News Streaming Network, and you can watch it at cbsnews.com or on our CBS News app. There will be more to come on your local news on the CBS station. And, of course, tonight on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell. Many of you will now return to CBS Mornings. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York.
American officials say North Korea has been test firing components of a new intercontinental ballistic missile. The country has ramped up its missile testing since the beginning of the year. Elizabeth Palmer has more.
North Korea had said the launches, 2 in the past 2 weeks, were to help develop satellites. But U.S. intelligence